Attention listeners, this following program is run by an untrained professional with no credentials. All events talked about are allegedly real and may seem unsettling to some listeners. Apologies, folks. It sounds like my neighbor is shedding his fur again. This story comes from the White River Mountain state of America. It's one that has been told and circulated for decades, as for many years, residents of New Hampshire have reported seeing half-man and half-dog hybrid creatures in the forests of New Hampshire. Some residents refer to these entities as dogmen, some refer to them as wolfmen, and some know them as werewolves. These sightings date back centuries, as the earliest reported sightings took place in 1778, when a local farmer from Franconia Notch wrote a spine-chilling entry into his journal. Within this journal entry, the farmer tells us an eerie story that supposedly took place earlier that day. The farmer's entry went something like this. Saw today a most peculiar beast at the edge of the woods. It stood upright like a man, yet had the head of a great hound. Its eyes glowed like embers in the twilight. When it saw me, it let out a howl that chilled my very soul, then ran into the forest on two legs, swift as the wind. I fear to speak of this to my neighbors, lest they think me mad or drunk. Yet I know what I saw was no natural thing. The way this text was written sends chills down my spine, as you can almost feel his hesitation and the fear that gripped him so strongly that he dared not share his sightings with his neighbors. But can we truly take this account at face value? The journal entry was written in an era where folklore and superstition played a very significant role in people's lives. It's possible that the farmer just misinterpreted what he truly saw that night. But what makes this story even more plausible is that this story was just the beginning of a wave of sightings that would take place for centuries in New Hampshire. Late one night in the summer of 1992, a group of 5 hikers setting up camp in the White Mountains reported hearing off-putting growling noises coming from the surrounding forest. At first, the hikers assumed it was a bear passing by the campsite, when suddenly the sounds got louder and closer. The hikers grabbed out cans of bear spray and safely secured their food rations. But what came out of that woods was no bear. What emerged from the trees was described as a tall humanoid figure, and in the dark first looked like another hiker or homeless man. The figure stood motionless about 50 yards from the hikers, and appeared to be watching them. Once the hikers finally got a better look at the figure, they realized that the proportions on the figure were inhuman. The hikers claimed that the being's face had features of a dog and had sharp fangs. The hikers froze in fear as the being watched them, as if it was trying to decide its next move. But in the blink of an eye, just as fast as the creature appeared, it suddenly dashed back into the woods and was never seen again. The hikers decided to call it quits a bit earlier that night. The way the witnesses described the being's proportions being off and having a seemingly intelligent, calculating stare is chilling and gives off the vibe of something from a classic childhood horror story. However, this to me makes it feel like the story might have been just made up for attention and to scare locals. However, when faced with fear, the human mind is known to exaggerate, either turning what might have been an animal encounter into something seemingly far more sinister. Or maybe, in a state of panic, the hikers' brains might have imagined these details and made whatever they saw appear the way they described it. Despite this, I can't jump into conclusions, but I can still speculate. Now, let's fast forward ahead to a more recent account of the dogmen phenomena of New Hampshire. A website called www.dogmenencounters.com, a site dedicated to documenting supposed dogmen sightings across all 50 states in the US, posted an intriguing encounter in Hillsborough, New Hampshire, by a local man named Logan Moreau in June of 2017. Logan Moreau claimed he was hiking the trails behind his high school with his dog late at night. Everything was going fine until he noticed that his normally calm and brave dog began to whimper and suddenly stopped moving. He then began to hear the sounds of branches moving and breaking in front of him. A deep sense of unease settled over him, and not wanting to find out what was lurking in the shadows, he turned around to head back. Quietly walking back, he felt something was watching him, and began to pick up the pace when suddenly, something from the trees surrounding him jolted out in front of him. Logan caught only a fleeting glimpse of the figure, claiming it was tall and covered in long black fur, and wasn't a bear or anything he's seen before. Once instinct took over, Moreau grabbed his dog and sprinted in the opposite direction, never again looking back. According to the website, whatever he encountered that night never appeared again, but the memory of it still haunts him to this day. Animals are often more attuned to their surroundings than humans, reacting to subtle changes in the environment or sensing threats before we do. The dog's unusual fear and refusal to move suggests that something was truly out of the ordinary. The dog's reaction in this story makes sense and shows that Logan and his dog were definitely in some kind of danger. However, there are reasons to be skeptical about what the creature actually was. The description of the creature is vague, offering little more beyond its large, muscular frame and long, dark fur. As I said before, fear and adrenaline can distort perception, making it difficult to trust memory in the moments of panic. While Logan insists it wasn't a bear, his mind could have exaggerated or misinterpreted what he saw. This first theory is not out of the question, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. But the common issue with these cryptid encounters like this is that they have a complete lack of physical evidence most of the time. And in none of these stories did anyone ever find any footprints, fur samples, or take any kind of videos or photos. It is very easy for someone in this case to just simply make up these stories for attention. This theory ultimately casts doubt not just on the individual accounts, but also the entire existence of dogmen in New Hampshire. If such creatures were roaming the forests, we would expect at least some form of concrete proof by now. However, I can't jump to conclusions just yet, as there are two more theories that I think might also explain what's really happening in these encounters. Another possibility is that each of these encounters involved real animals, but fear, darkness, and adrenaline in the witnesses may have distorted their perceptions and made the appearance of other wildlife look unworldly. One might think that these witnesses might have been seeing wolves or coyotes, A coyote or a wolf standing on its hind legs could resemble what the witnesses described. However, New Hampshire no longer really has an established wolf population. Personally, I feel black bears are the most likely culprit. New Hampshire has a healthy black bear population, and they can stand on their hind legs for short distances, especially if they're injured or curious. A black bear glimpsed at in the dark, especially one with unusual posture, could resemble something unnatural, much like what Logan Moreau claimed to have found with his dog. For believers, I would say the idea of dogmen existing in New Hampshire is still a possibility. First of all, each of these stories have a very consistent description that could suggest that the witnesses are seeing the same kind of entity rather than different animals. Now, for the moment of possible truth. Let's go ahead and rank these so-called sightings on the Braindead scale. I'll be judging this rating based on how likely I think these so-called dogmen creatures truly exist within the forest of New Hampshire. Ladies and gentlemen, drum roll please. Overall, I rate the New Hampshire werewolf sightings a 20% on the Braindead scale. The absence of physical evidence, combined with the high probability of misidentified wildlife and exaggerated storytelling, makes it extremely unlikely that the dogmen truly roam the forest of New Hampshire. While the consistencies of descriptions is eerie, it's not enough to override the glaring lack of proof. It is very likely that all these encounters were either straight up bogus or just misinterpreted. For example, the 1778 journal entry, while mysterious, comes from an era where folklore and superstition played a big role in people's lives. People at the time often misinterpreted natural occurrences as supernatural events, often influenced by local legends. It's possible the farmer saw a large wolf, bear, or even a person, but through fear and trick of the mind, what he saw was turned into something much more monstrous. Overall, this case's lack of physical evidence, reliability, and room for misinterpretation truly hurts its credibility. However, we need to remember that 20% is not zero, and there still is some room for belief, because that 80% sliver of doubt is where the legend truly lives. So until we find more paw prints in the snow, or something unnatural howling into the moonlight, keep your silver braid close, your eyes open, and your pets indoors. Because if something is truly out there, it's certainly not after your trash.
Listen to them. Children of the night. What music they make.